Howdy, all. Happy Tuesday. Sorry, happy Wednesday.
Ah,
It's an homage to Eck. Uh, 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 I was up in Toronto last night for the Vegas Leafs game. We'll talk about that and some of the games last night. There were 9 games, I believe, on the NHL schedule. But as we normally do, we'll start with some non-hockey related stuff. And I was hearing like over the weekend and on Monday some talk about Yankees owner George Steinbrenner possibly gaining entry into the Hall of Fame. Now he's a controversial figure. You know, he was basically kept out of baseball operations for the Yankees for what was it, a couple years? The whole Howie Spira situation.
couple of years, for good reason. I mean, he put a black eye on the sport at the time, and really didn't do any wonders for his franchise at the time.
And some people think it actually spurred the Yankee dynasty of the late 90s and early 2000s, because while he was away, Gene Michael was able to draft the Bernie Williamses and the Derek Jeters and Pettit and all the core 4 or core 5
with nobody, meddling free, we should say.
No, right, and no pressure to trade them, just let them develop, and then when he came back, they were ready to come into the league, and they became the stars that they were. Well, anyway, Steinbrenner's. I just read up on this. So it's something called the Game Era Committee.
Yeah.
And there's 10. They're going to choose, or there's 10. A 10-name ballot to be reviewed and voted upon in early December. And here are the names that are listed.
Mm-hmm.
Harold Baines, who I believe had like 2,800 hits, but at the end of the year, at the end of his career, he was more of a compiler and a DH.
He was. I agree with that.
Albert Bell, whose career was shortened by injury, but
he had some great years. He did, but he just didn't have enough of them. He hit doubles, like he's up there in the all-time doubles. Like I
think he's over 400 home runs too.
Yeah.
Joe Carter, who hit the famous game-winning home run for the Blue Jays in '93. Will Clark, who was a very good first baseman for San Francisco and St. Louis and Baltimore, and Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Oral Hershiser, who I believe is a Hall of Famer.
That's the first one that I would put in, because nobody's going to break his consecutive innings scoreless streak. He had a nice second half of a career with the Mets and I think one other team after he left the Mets, but he was part of their playoff drives. I would put Oral Hershiser in. I don't think it's all about numbers with him.
No, I think Oral Hershiser's in the sort of the Kurt Schilling, Pedro Martinez category of they didn't have the longevity of guys like Glavine and Maddox, but in the modern day, you're not going to get somebody with 290, 300, 310 victory. I mean, that's why like guys like Andy Pettit and Mike Mussina, I think have a chance to get even Tommy John or Jim Cott might have a chance eventually to make the Hall of Fame. Former Mets manager Davey Johnson.
Yeah, I think Davey Johnson's a lock. I mean, look what he did even if you don't want to put credence for what he did as a time with the Mets, which again was multiple playoff appearances, multiple division championships, multiple division championships. They didn't win the second league championship. I'm not going to get into that. But then with the Reds, he also won with them. Like he got made to the playoffs with them and dealing with Marge Schott. And
the Nationals too.
And that was when he was not on board with sitting
Strasburg.
And that was the beginning of the end for that.
Now this one I don't get. Charlie Manuel?
Well, I mean, again, he did win a championship. He was with Cleveland when they were very successful. I think if Davey Johnson gets in, Charlie Manuel probably gets in also.
Lou Piniella, I think that's a no-brainer.
See, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if Lou Piniella is a no-brainer, but
are you putting him in the compiler category because he managed for like 30 years?
Yeah, I think. But here's the thing. I'd be okay with all 3 of those managers going in. I would.
And the last is Lee Smith.
Lee Smith is really good. Yeah, I would go Smith, Hershiser, and the managers. That's who I would put in, because here's the thing about Lee Smith. He had so many multiple inning saves. He didn't always come in the ninth inning. He would come in even in the sixth inning if he had to lock down a game. And if you saw Lee Smith pitching
with the Cubs, especially,
he couldn't even get out of the dugout. His knees were so bad.
Yeah, with the Cubs especially, when early in his career he was unbelievable. And Steinbrenner, I'm biased. I'm a Yankee fan.
I would put Steinbrenner in. I hated him. Here's my little backstory with Steinbrenner. Growing up, I was a big Met fan, obviously, and I used to watch Mets and Yankees games, and I became a big fan of Bobby Mercer. And I even told this story to Bobby Mercer, and he laughed at me because he didn't believe it at first. So, and one year Bobby Mercer gets traded, right? He gets traded for Bobby Bonds, I think. Yep. And what happens then is I become anti-Yankee and I start hating the Yankees. And lo and behold, when I was 10 years old, little did I know that was Steinbrenner's first year taking over the club. So I was a George Steinbrenner hater from the very beginning. Now, end of the day, still very successful. End of the day, won a lot of championships. So I would put him in.
What I'm surprised at, there's two names on here, and I'll stick to being sort of New York and St. Louis centric.
Mm-hmm.
Keith Hernandez, I think, is Hall of Fame caliber, and Don Mattingly, I think, is Hall of Fame caliber.
They both just missed the same as Will Clark. The minute you let one of them in, you'd have to let them all in. And I think because first baseman is still perceived as a power position, they miss out because they just don't have the numbers. I can give you two other names, though. One of them is, and I brought this up, I have a book out called Pioneers of Baseball. There's a guy named Dummy Hoy. He was a deaf ball player. He's in the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame. He's not in the Hall of Fame. He might be the guy responsible for hand signals with the umpires, calling balls and strikes and everything else. Plus, he was a great fielder. Plus, he was a really good player. I would put a guy like that in because, again, you're never going to have another player like that in the league. Now, Curtis Pride was deaf, but back when he was deaf, the league was a little bit more forward and it was a lot easier. I mean, again, if you're a deaf guy and they're nicknaming you dummy, obviously even the world was sort of against you, right? And the other guy is Ted Simmons. Ted Simmons, to me, and this is, I give you the Burt Blyleven argument on this one. I remember I used to write Burt Blyleven's a Hall of Famer, he's a Hall of Famer, he's a Hall of Famer once a year on my website, and he finally would get in. Ted Simmons, here's the thing about it. He was a multiple-time All-Star. Was he the greatest fielder? No. Was he good enough? Yes. Was he a great hitter? Yeah, he was. He wasn't a power hitting catcher. But if you had Ted Simmons now, you would say that's Joe Mauer. I mean, you would, except he didn't have the high average Joe Mauer did, but he would get 23, 20. He would get like, not 23. He would get like 175 hits a year, even as a catcher. But he hit, 18 homers. He would get RBIs, though. He was a major RBI guy.
Yeah, he was in the middle of the lineup with the Cardinals in the 70s with Hernandez. And
look what he did with the Brewers. At the end of his career, he was still really good and was part of that team that made it with the Harvey Wallbangers. I think he's a Hall of Famer. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think Lou Whitaker is a better Hall of Fame candidate than the guy that just made it, Alan Trammell. I mean, they were sort of like
Whitaker to get into,
and there are not a ton of second basemen. So anyway, I just wanted to touch on that because it was interesting, and I didn't want to go into the subject that I originally talked about in the pre-show. Okay, hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, November 7th, 2018.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Okay, we had a bunch of games last night, so we'll talk about some of them, most of them, and some of the things that happened and some observations of some of the players on those teams. Let's start with the Rangers-Canadiens game. The Rangers win 5-3. Let's see, Neil Pionk and Mika Zibanejad had goals in the third period in a 3-goal rally in the third period to give the Rangers the victory. Henrik Lundqvist with 31 saves. Now, Russ, we were talking about this before the show about the Rangers and what their plans were going into the season and what is sort of happening right now. And like with the Leafs back, I would say maybe 10 years ago, their plan, at least the plan of many people, including, I don't know if it was a plan of the organization for the Leafs, but it was the plan of the fans, was for the team to tank, was for the team to finish as low as possible, get high draft picks. That was sort of adopted by Jeff Gorton and the organization with the letter that they sent out last year. And it looked to be that direction that they were following. They're 7-7-1. They're playing too well.
Right. They're playing too well, and we kind of knew this would be a problem with Henrik Lundqvist, and for as long as he stays there, it's going to be a problem. The positive side is the peon play was great, right? Like, he did it from his own end. He did a spin move, went right around, down the end and around. I'm not sure who it was on defense for the Canadians. It probably didn't matter, but they really didn't do a good job of even trying to defend that. It was a great play. I mean, Pionk has a great shot. He has mobility. He's not a great defender. So we'll see if he does find a place in this league, because it is so offensive. Maybe he will, right? Look, Thomas Tatar, we got to say that this is starting to be a really good pickup. We thought it was a decent pickup for the Canadians. He had 2 goals in that game. He looked good. Price looked good. Price against Lundqvist. It was a game that was riveting to me because of those two. And Lundqvist's first goal to Tatar was probably one he'd want to get back. But I really enjoyed the game. The problem is, yes, the Rangers are playing too well. And that's where the argument will come in, because right now it's great. The fans are like, yeah, we're 500 and everything else. But when the season really starts to kick in and everything starts to settle and you're like that 3rd or 4th team out of the playoff picture, and you're not the worst team in the league. And this is what the Rangers will have gone through for so many years. So, and they've never picked 1st overall. So they'll probably end up like 8th overall, 9th overall. Yes, they have a lot of money, so they could spend it next year. And yes, this could be a big year for development. I get you want the fans to see a good product. It's a very tough argument here, but I think I really would have tanked more than what they're doing. I get that they're not, because they have a new coach, but that's the GM could do something about this at the deadline and start trading away assets. Because
that's where I think they might be going here, because if you look at their roster, we mentioned Kevin Hayes last week regarding possibility of him getting traded. I know there was some speculation on the part of one of the insiders, either TSN or Sportsnet, about
he's still coasting out there. He never gets up a full head of steam skating. He played second line center yesterday, and there's times where he's coasting.
Well, the question is, how much do you think it will affect the Rangers in terms of downshifting their ability to win if they move their UFAs? And that's Hayes, Zuccarello, and Adam McQuaid on the blue line.
Well, McQuaid would actually have to be healthy, which is the thing that I mentioned when they signed him, is that he'll be on the IR multiple times this year. And this is the thing. When you get a guy like that, you never know if he's going to be healthy come deadline time. And so now, him being on the IR was a big break for D'Angelo, because he continues to play well. Mm-hmm. I think if they lose those guys, Zuccarello especially, they'll downturn big time. Zuccarello's a major factor on this team, still is, had great play yesterday. So, yeah, he's a big factor. But another play yesterday that I tweeted about was Max Domi. He is a punk now. He is. The elbow to the head that he gave Philip Hedl was bad. The weird thing is the refs don't call anything. So then, of course, Cody McLeod goes out on the ice, and I forget who he hit. Maybe he hit Duran. I forget who it was. And he goes off, right? He gets into a tussle. He goes off. He's bleeding. The refs don't care that he's bleeding because it's Cody McLeod. I get it. And so they're not going to – but at the end of the day, after all these things, and Mark Stahl also stepped up for his teammates, at the end of the day, the Rangers were down 2 men. Now, they did kill it off. But again, I question – the whole Cody McLeod, what is he really doing for this team? Because, again, Max Domi didn't care that Cody McLeod was on a team. He still took the dirty hit to the head of Hedl. Now, end of the day, just like I've said before, and I want to say it again, the referees should police this better. If they would have done something about the Domi hit,
right, then
none of the other stuff would have happened.
Yeah, but the problem is that we're still at a point in this league where teams are unwilling to let the officials or to let the league be the defense mechanism for their players. I understand your point regarding McLeod and regarding the Rangers, because the Rangers are a rebuilding team, and all you're doing is taking the 23rd spot on your roster and giving it to a guy who's over 30 and is basically, a fourth line enforcer. I explained it when we were talking
defense in front of the net and ended up being responsible for a goal given up.
Right, but my response when we heard that McLeod was brought in by the Rangers was he was there to protect the kids. Now, protect the kids doesn't mean you can. There's preemption there. You're going to prevent Max Domi from being a jerk and elbowing somebody. But what McLeod did, and I don't know what he did to Drouin, but if he scared the life out of Drouin, then let's see Domi do that. Domi do that again, and
that's the point. Domi will do it again, and he didn't get tagged for it this time.
And that's the thing. Domi is feeling his oats right now. He's having a lot of success. He's having a lot of success in Montreal. He's scoring goals. He's got 9 goals right now. He's making that trade look one-sided unexpectedly for the Canadians, although Galchenyuk was injured. So he basically has carte blanche to do anything. And if he wants to be a punk, then he can be a punk. Now, I like players that play with edge, but it's one thing to play with an edge. It's one thing to sort of emulate the cheap shottedness of your dad, which was like, when he did the Niedermeyer thing and a few other things during his career. That don't go that way, because he's an extremely talented player. And I don't know if he can be a star, but he can be, I think, an effective second line center. But if he goes down that road, then he is going to be considered a punk.
Yeah, like here's the stat line for Cody McLeod: 2 for charging, 4 for roughing, 10-minute misconduct. Like, what's the point? Seriously. Now, will he get a 1-game suspension because of that? Probably not.
Yeah, but I mean, it'll be interesting to see when Gorton decides to. Can he put a stop to it? I mean, like I used to say back in the day that the responsibility of general managers like John Ferguson Jr. and Cliff Fletcher when he was an interim guy, and then Brian Burke in Toronto, was to destroy the team. Meaning not, on a short-term basis, keep them from winning. Go out like Lou Lamoriello did when the Leafs finished last overall. You go out and you sign the Brad Boyses and the PA Parentos to fill your roster with players that can get through the season, but weren't good enough to actually win.
So they're maybe at the deadline is when they'll start to drop, but I don't think they'll ever drop enough to be really a player for Jack Hughes or Keiko. And so I think at the end of the day, these players better develop, because if they don't, then you're really into it. Then you're like, was this even a worthwhile season?
Now, the Ottawa Senators bounced back from Ubergate, which it's being called right now, with a 7-3 victory over the now struggling New Jersey Devils. I believe the Devils are 0-5 on the road. I think they're really successful. Let me look for the home road breakdown, but I believe they're really having a tough time away from the Rock. And I mean, I know I trashed the Senators yesterday as being an organization that is just completely dysfunctional, and I completely stick by that. The thing is, though, they do have talent, and there are players. It's not going to be a situation where they're not going to win on some nights. I mean, you and I have both talked about Thomas Chabot being a really, really good defenseman, and in the absence of Erik Karlsson, he's got 20 points right now,
which is great. I mean, that is a positive. And the negative is they don't have a lot of other defensemen to play with them. And so that's the thing. And they don't have a ton of scoring. Obviously, they lost Hoffman. That was big. Losing Karlsson does hurt a little bit. But like you said, Chabot's added for that. But they have a lot of other guys that aren't scoring. We do have to give credit to Matt Duchene, too, because he publicly apologized to the assistant coach for Ottawa, and that was classy. He's a classy guy. I mean, everybody makes a mistake.
Yeah, and in New Jersey right now is 1-5 on the road and 5-1-1 at home. So Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, basically. And that's the thing. We've talked about the goaltending situation there with Kincaid and with Schneider. I'm not sure who started last night, but if I had to guess, it probably was Schneider based on the result. But let me see here. Just going to the box score. Sorry about this, folks. We're doing this on the fly. Let's see here. Game summary. Is that Jordan that's doing the?
It's Carla. She's being a pest.
Kincaid and Schneider both played. 4 games. Yeah, Schneider got the start. 4 goals on 22 shots, and then Kincaid came in.
It's
So
been rough for Schneider. I mean, he's not back.
no, he's not. And that again, we talked about this before. The situation with the Devils with their goaltending, if they think Kincaid is the number one, if they think he's the go-to guy, the problem is they've got Schneider under contract for I think 3 more years at $6 million. You've got to find a way. If you think Kincaid is the guy and you want to sign him to a long-term deal, you've got to find a way to shop Schneider, because you cannot have a
he's losing games. He's got a 471 game goals against and an 862 save percentage.
Right, and that's the problem. You can't have a $6 million backup. So you have to find a way to start winning and him to have success. Otherwise, I think you're stuck with him. And I don't know if you can sign Kincaid to the long. You can't spend 10, 11, $12 million on your goaltending.
Well, they can. They got plenty of cap room. I mean, they can.
Yeah, but do they want to?
Well, I mean, they might have to. I mean, if they want to win and Schneider doesn't allow them to win and there's not much of a market for him right now because he's coming back, then yes, they're going to have to.
Columbus beats the Dallas Stars 4-1. Sergei Bobrovsky with 27 saves. Duclair, Foligno, Ryan Murray with his first of the year, and Nudavera with the goals. Jamie Benn with the goal. Now, the funny thing is, Jamie Benn, he scored a goal against the Leafs last week. I think that was his first goal in like 7 games. I mean, he's got 7 goals now, but again, Dallas needs Ben and Sagan to score regularly, and if they don't, they're like in pretty deep trouble.
I think Sagan will. I think Ben, I don't know if he's been the same since the hip injuries,
Yeah. And they're paying him big money. So now again, Bobrovsky plays well. They get the victory. They're 8-6-1. I still don't buy into into Tortorella being in trouble. But anything's possible if they continue to sort of go back and forth and be around 500. Then maybe with this being a small 1-year window before they potentially could lose Bobrovsky and Panarin. I just wonder, at what point does Kekalainen say, okay, we got to move one of these guys or both of these guys?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to go back to the Ben thing because I was just looking over his numbers. I don't think he'll ever reach the 90-point mark again. I think he's around the 70, 75-point guy, which is still really good in this league. But, that's where – but this team, sort of the way it's built, need him to be a 90-point guy. Kekalainen, he might let these guys just play through. I am not going to be completely shocked if he just lets them play through.
Well, you can say he has job security because both him and Davidson got extensions, and so did Tortorella.
Right.
So then you could say that ownership has signed off on that. But in terms of what I think is the key thing with most managers in this league, asset management, that is terrible asset management. If they make a first round exit and keep Panarin and Bobrovsky, and then they walk away for nothing, that I really question that thought process.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, it's an impossible position that they're in.
I buy more into the Doug Armstrong model, where he trades Paul Stastny while he's still in the playoff race last year and gets a first round pick and a prospect. And he did it the year before, and I can't remember right now who he did it with, but he traded another player. Oh, Shattenkirk. He traded Shattenkirk for a package of players at the deadline the previous year because he knew he was walking. And, now St. Louis hasn't had a great deal of success, but I mean, it gave them assets to play with. And
they may do that. They might. You could be right about that. But for now, it's hard to say that that's definitely what they're going to do. I don't think they know what they're going to do. Well, I think he's going to have to dictate it.
It's too early right now. I mean, the first move is always made around American Thanksgiving, and these are moves that are probably made closer to January, or as we would get within, say, a month of the trade deadline, when maybe Kekalainen has more of an idea of where his team is. If they're sort of like in the middle of the pack in the Metro, they're like third place, first wild card, second wild card. I mean, is that enough to prove to him that they should keep these guys, or does he trade one of them or trade both of them and then hope for the best? I mean, I don't know.
I really don't know right now, because I think if they trade those guys, even though they'll get pretty good assets back, they could miss the playoffs. And to me, making the playoffs has to be what the plan was this year. And I think veering off from that is worse than not getting the assets, believe it or not.
Now, the game I was at last night was the Leafs and Golden Knights.
I just want to point out we've probably gone a half hour before talking about the Leafs. That's pretty good. All right,
yeah. So people can't complain that we let off with the Leafs. The Leafs won 3-1 over the Vegas Golden Knights. Ugly injury in this game. Eric Halla hit by, and it was not because of the hit. I mean, most people, it was a hit by Patrick Marleau into the boards. It was a clean hit. It was nothing out of the ordinary. What happened was it looked like Halla's right skate got caught in a rut, and when he got hit, his skate stayed in the ice and his ankle gave way. It was ugly. He was taken off on a stretcher. I would assume based on it did not look like one of those injuries where it could be a high ankle sprain. It looked like bones were broken. So that's a long-term injury for a key player for the Golden Knights who just got Pacioretty back from a long injury. It was a concussion injury apparently. So the things are not, and this is not a pun, but things are not breaking right for the Golden Knights right now.
No, it's a problem. I mean, and it's too bad because Hall has been a really, really good player for them. But, yeah, he's just crumpled in a heap. It's not good. Right now, I mean, again, they haven't had these guys playing together. They actually have to have this team healthy for a week to see what they have. McPhee will be in a tough spot at the deadline if they're not playing up to snuff because there are guys that he can move to. And so I kind of wonder which position he will go in because we don't know what the Vegas Golden Knights are this year. We knew they wouldn't be last year's team. They're not that.
Right.
We know that they're not like an expansion team, bad as an expansion team. They're not that. But they might just be one of those teams in the middle. And that's a problem. Yeah,
and I, like I said, I was just having an informal conversation with somebody who is on the who's a reporter covering the Knights, and basically said that they really miss Nate Schmidt, and you can see that their defense. They're I mean, right now Nick Holden's on the top pairing with Shea Theodore. I mean, that's not Brad Hunt is playing. This is not the defense of last year. So yeah, I mean, we know what Nick Holden is. He at best he's a bottom pairing guy, and he's filling in because he's a right shot D. He's playing on the top pairing with Shea Theodore, and that's not a good combo. So when Schmidt comes back, he'll probably be getting 20 to 25 minutes a night, and that I'm sure that'll improve things. And when they get Stastny back, that'll improve things as well. But I believe they're now 2-6 on the road, so they're struggling away from home ice.
Well, hang on. To talk about them just a little further on Vegas. So right now, if I do look at their farm system, right, last year, I don't think they got one A type prospect. I think they got like a B and a C, right? And so the year before, their only other year, I think they've got they've got 3 A's, a B, and a bunch of C's. So that's all they have in their system. It's not incredibly deep. So you do kind of wonder if McPhee would try and sort of dump out at the deadline if this is just a lost year, so he could get a better pick for the farm system. It wouldn't shock me if Vegas does that. I think the fans would be able to handle it based on last year. So that's, to me, that might be the strategy.
And
one they started with, but it might be what they finished with.
Yeah, and like I said, with my informal talk with the Vegas reporter, he was saying that Brandstrom looked really, really good at training camp, and maybe on some teams they would have actually had to make the team, but there's no rush, and they have enough depth on defense that they could allow him to just develop and come up maybe next year as a 20-year-old.
Right now with Chicago, but they're going to let him play the whole year, which is good.
Yeah, it's smart. It's smart to do. Now, on the other side, the Leafs. This is the concern. they got another great game from Frederick Anderson. He made 36 saves. They were outshot 37-21 at home. If it wasn't for an empty netter, they scored their average of 2 goals per game at home, which is now 9 games they've scored 19 goals in 9 home games. That's as compared to they're scoring over 5 goals per game on the road. So
like everything else at the MLSE, the high price of goals.
Well, I mean, and the thing is, you can't say it's because Austin Matthews is out and William Nylander is not there because Austin Matthews was there for half of that the recent struggle in terms of the home games, and they weren't able to generate a ton of offense. They've only scored 4 goals once in 9 home games, and they've scored 7 goals twice on the road, and they only scored 4 goals once at home. The other no, they did score the first goal. They're undefeated when they scored the first goal. They've allowed the first goal 10 of the 15 games that they played.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like a
75-80% stat anyhow in the NHL that you score the first goal, you're around 70 to 80% guaranteed to win.
Yeah, and they're 5-0 undefeated with the first goal and 5-5 without. Mitch Marner again is stepping up in the absence of Austin Matthews.
Mm-hmm.
He scored the game-winning goal early in the second period. Last year he did that when Matthews was out late in the season. He's doing it again. And when people compare, and I know this is an argument sort of with the analytics crowd of who is more valuable to the Leafs, William Nylander, who's not signed, or Mitch Marner. The eye test to me says Marner, and the statistics would, to my mind, say Marner because Marner has stepped up when Matthews has not been in the lineup. And last year, when Matthews was not in the lineup, Nylander scored 3 goals in 20 games. And
I'm forgetting about that, right? I think the eye test would tell you that Marner is clearly that guy. Like, I don't know who would argue the Nylander case. I just think it's silly to argue the Nylander case. The one thing that's interesting about Marner that he did yesterday, which is a great thing but a bad thing at times, is when he has the puck and he circles completely around the net and no one can touch him because he's the best skater on the ice, but then he has the puck and he's not ready to shoot it and has to find somebody open. The problem is it's hard to actually stay in sync with a guy that's moving that fast to figure out where he's going to pass the puck.
But Russ, on that play was the best scoring chance of the entire game because he went around the net once and then found Tavares at the side of the net for a one-timer, and only an unbelievable save by Fleury stopped it. So it was not like a Sergei Berezin, Maxim Afinogenov skate around the net twice and lose the puck.
No. That one wasn't. But I imagine he has times where, unless it's John Tavares, you've got to be at a pretty high level to be able to even keep up with it.
Yeah. Agreed.
But now, if you watch, it is.
Now, and we won't spend too much time on this. You can check your watch, Russ. On the Nylander watch, again.
I think that's for 4 minutes. Go ahead.
Again, Rick Dudley was at the Scotiabank Arena for the 5th time in the last 2 weeks. That's not unusual because we know Carolina is interested if the Leafs do decide that they're gonna move Nylander. 3 other teams, one of them sort of stealthily, and that's the one I want to talk about, but I'll leave with the other 2. Tampa Bay had Pat Verbeek and another scout at the game. They've had multiple scouts at Leaf games over the last couple weeks. According to Elliot Friedman, there was a Leafs scout at Tampa Bay the last 3 games, but I have to sort of put a caveat to this. These are 2 teams, rivals in the same division, who have not played each other. So this could simply be them scouting for future meetings, which these will be key because these are probably 2 of the 3 top teams in the Atlantic. So it could simply be they're just familiarizing themselves with tactics, power play, line.
I heard, and I don't know if this is true. I know Bojangles, the chicken chain, is for sale. And I heard because Rick Dudley has eaten there because it's in the South, that they're testing it for the Toronto market, and that's why he's been there.
Yeah, they're going to pair up with Smokes Poutineery.
Smokes gone from the Philly landscape. It didn't make it.
Yes, there you go. So did Hero Certified Burgers. It lasted about five seconds in Buffalo, and then it went back up over the border. Now, Tampa Bay was one team. Arizona had 2 scouts at the game yesterday. And again, Arizona's got cap space. They've got prospects. They could be a fit in a Nylander deal, but I mean, the question is, do they have the young defenseman that the Leafs would be looking for? The only guy that I could see was Chychrun. I mean, we've categorized his health problems recently.
I know he's not even on the ice. I mean, he is. He's practicing. So I don't think the Leafs would even trade for him with his health up in the air right this moment. So do they have that guy? No, they don't. I don't think they're a good trade partner for them. I think a 3-way trade, which I know we hate to talk about, is probably the way that Arizona gets involved, because maybe they put someone like Dylan Strome in it, and then all of a sudden, it gets interesting.
Now, the third team, and they had to credit David Pagnotta, the fourth period, for breaking this, because there was one Anaheim scout in the press box, but Ducks GM Bob Murray was in the crowd.
Okay.
Watching the game. And anytime I see a potential of a trade with the Leafs, one of the teams I automatically consider is Anaheim. Mm-hmm. And based on Anaheim, in terms of their long of the tooth, some of their forwards like Getzlaf and Perry, who's injured, and Kessler, and the opportunity to add a top 6 forward with speed. And what they have in the organization. We're talking about an organization that has, and I'm not saying they're going to trade Lindholm or they're going to trade Fowler, but they have Montour, they have Jakob Larsson, they're loaded with defense prospects and defensemen who may be on the verge of being top 4 guys in the NHL. Plus, they have a lot of young forwards like Steele and Troy Terry and Nick Ritchie. I mean, there's the potential there of a package that would make sense for a Leafs Anaheim deal involving Nylander.
Yeah, I think Brandon Montour could be that guy, because Marcus Pettersson stepped up now, and even though he wouldn't provide the same offense, they still have Fowler. They have guys who could provide the offense. So I think defensively he's fit in nicely, and like you said, Olofsson's up. Yep. So they could possibly make that deal, and that is a team that does need scoring, and that would look nice. That would look nice for them. I don't know what else it would require in that deal. I mean, if you went Montour, you might be able to go Montour for Nylander straight up. Actually, that might actually work for both. Depending on especially.
Yeah, and I don't think Josh Manson would. They love Manson. He provided a different edge. They, with Fowler and Lindholm being guys who play 2-way, who are offensive and defensive, they could afford to give up Montour's, I think, more of an offensive defenseman. But we'll see. I mean, I just know that the landscape, seeing multiple teams there, it just contributes to the likelihood of a Nylander deal being possible. But all I know is, and this will be the last thing, is that you
went over, just so you know.
Yeah, the potential of them, it's coming out from multiple places. Well, the Leafs could hold on to Nylander past December the 1st. What this is a scare tactic for other teams that are interested. This is a scare tactic for Nylander's camp, because the last thing they want is him to not get a contract and not play in the NHL after December 1st and have to scramble to find, a place to play in the SHL or in the KHL for the rest of the year and lose out on $6 to $7 million in salary.
Yeah, so, I handicap that as a 0% chance of happening, him being there after December 1st.
Now we'll touch on a few of the other games, and we'll take a couple questions in the chat.
Already started that up. Yep.
Okay, cool. The Lightning beat the Oilers 5-2. After the Oilers have started to have some success, they've lost 2 straight road games to the Caps and to the Lightning. They played Koskinen, and they've played him after playing Talbot. I think every game they played Koskinen 2 of the last 3.
Remember I talked about handicapping that game and said there was no way I would ever take Edmonton in that game.
Yeah, well, yeah, and lo and behold, Connor McDavid does not score a goal, and they don't win. I mean, Draisaitl had a goal. Dylan Strome had his first of the year.
Ryan Strome.
Ryan Strome, excuse me.
Yeah.
There's too many Stromes.
Yeah.
Ryan Strome. But I mean
that's rough.
What's that?
That's rough. I mean, but we talked about it. He's not a great goal scorer. He wasn't for the Islanders. He also was a product of Tavares. And I like him. I like his skating. I like his passing. But as far as goal scoring, you're talking about a 15-goal-a-year guy.
Yeah, I thought he was going to be more than that when they drafted him. He was fifth. He was a 5th overall pick. I thought he was.
You got to throw that. You know the deal.
Yeah. The St. Louis Blues get a 4-1 victory over Carolina. 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 Here you go. Curtis McElhinney, the savior in goal, had 16 saves. The Blues scored. Now I don't know. He may have been pulled, so I'm going to pull up the box score here, but. He only had 16 saves, and the Blues scored 4 goals. That's not exactly a savior in goal.
Well, I mean, look, do we not see them slipping anyhow? I mean, they're slipping.
Yeah, he only faced 19 shots, so that one of them was an empty netter, whereas Chad Johnson made 38 saves in the victory. And Ryan O'Reilly scored a hat trick. So big. It was a big win for the Blues. I'm sure Mike Yeo right now is praying to get every victory he possibly can because the specter of Joel Quenneville coming in. I keep a lot of the insiders on both Sportsnet and TSN up in Canada were saying where's Quenneville going to go, or is he going to take a little rest? And I'm of the opinion, like I said yesterday, Russ, that if the Blues falter in the next week or two, I wouldn't put it above Quenneville to step back in and take the job in St. Louis. I think it's a situation where they've got a lot of talent there and they just need somebody to come in and straighten it out.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I got to go back to Carolina for a minute because I looked up Darling, who's got an 893, which again, I don't think he can get the job done. Carolina has now slipped. They have 14 points. They're -5 on the differential, and they're 271 in their last 10. So for all the talk and heap praise that we had to give them early on because of all these different things, they're slipping badly. And I don't think they have the goaltending to come out of it. I wonder if they'll make a trade. I wonder if they will, because look, McElhinney, they could always just put back on waivers. Mrazek, where is Mrazek? Like, why?
They're playing. He's not hurt. They're playing 3 goalies. I mean,
I know, but why is that? Like, is it just because nobody's good enough? Is that?
Well, maybe Brindamore hasn't found the guy who's his go-to guy. Nobody has taken the bit and run with it.
So here's the thing about Mrazek, and then this is the problem that I was going to have with him for this year too. His goals against is fine, right? It's 275 because they do have a good defense. His save percentage is 880. So they don't have one solid goalie.
Right.
They really don't. They're in a tough spot. If I'm them, I'd probably make a trade. I probably, send McElhinney pack in, get somebody else in there, and between Mrazek and Darling, figure it out and either trade one of them or even just, option one of them out. Was Mrazek got a 1-year deal, right?
Yes.
So they could jettison him out and make Darling the backup. And that might be the best position for them because he is a backup. Like, that's what Scott Darling's a backup.
Maybe that's the destination for Corey Schneider.
Maybe.
Okay, just to touch on the other games, Elias Pettersson scores a goal, but the Canucks lose to the Red Wings 3-2 in a shootout.
It's never going to last. He's a rookie. Come on.
Willie Desjardins wins in his debut, a 4-1 victory for the LA Kings over the Anaheim Ducks.
Wait, hold on. You have to say more than that about Pettersson. Isn't that 10 goals in 10 games?
Yeah. That's why I was like, why are you peeing on his accomplishment here?
I was obviously kidding because
I brought it up. What do you want me to do?
No, I was just kidding. Now, here's the thing. Do we think, and I think this is fair to say it,
okay,
is he going to challenge the goal record for the 50 games like Wayne Gretzky?
No.
Is this going to happen?
No.
You're saying it's impossible? Because I don't think it's impossible.
I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying, the one concern I have, and I've heard other people say this as well, is the fact that he's not and we've talked about it, he is not a big player, and I think he'll be a target now, and he could get hurt. And if he doesn't get hurt, we know he's extremely, elusive. He's incredibly fast. If he can avoid the contact, I think he'll have great totals. I don't know if he'll, 50 and 50. I think that's, I have to see a lot more and see him continuing to pile up the goals before I would be.
I think there's a outside chance that he could do the 50 and 50. But what if he does 40 and 50?
I'm already impressed.
But that seems doable. And he is literally, I know when I said preseason he was my Calder favorite, I was all behind it. But he's exceeded what I even thought he would do right now, because I thought he would get 75 points. Now, he probably will get 75 points, but 40 of them might be goals.
Yeah, it's extremely impressive. And him and Besser are the cornerstones, and maybe Quinn Hughes next year are the cornerstones of a team that could really be something in a year or two. And again, that's the direction that the Canucks have needed to go in for the last few years. But instead of signing all these free agent guys to come in and be patchwork fixes.
Well, here's the other thing too. Remember, Virtanen's got 5 goals in 16 games. He had 10 all of last year. He's got 7 points in 16 games. He can be exactly like Tom Wilson, but score a little more. And so that's what I always liked about Jake Virtanen. So that's another big piece for them. This team does the right thing in the offseason, and in a year or two, when Demko's really in there and established, they're going to be good.
And hopefully with a little more common sense than Tom Wilson. And in the last game, and this apparently was, it was a matchup of two of the better teams in the West. The Sharks beat the Wild 4-3. I know, Rusty. I know that you picked the Wild to win the West, and right now everything is going right for them. Everything is Parise staying healthy. They're getting production. Their defense is doing well. If Parise and Suter can, the biggest miracle is Suter. Suter was supposed to be out potentially for the first half of this season with the injury that he had late in the year, and he came back at training camp and he's been fine.
He's a horse. We all knew that. And if you ever looked at him, throughout his whole career, he's logged incredible minutes. He may not be the most offensive defenseman that you could get in this game, but as far as a guy who's dependable, who you could just pile minutes on, he's one of those guys. And so that's why I always had him just under a guy like Doughty, because Doughty's just better offensively, a little better skater. But Suter is incredible. And this is, look, I'll keep trumpeting the Wild because I know they're going to be there in the end.
All right, let's take a couple questions if we got them from the chat.
All right. First question. I'm looking to see. Yermu asks, "Hi, Mike and Russ. If Nylander was to be traded for Brett Pesce, who has a reasonable 6x5 deal, what other pieces would you need?"
Well, Kaya believes. Okay, this is the thing. I like Brett Pesce. I think Pesce is everything that the Leafs are looking for in terms of he's a right shot D. He provides cost certainty. He's signed on a contract, I think 5 more years at about $4.025 million. So I think he would be a perfect defensive pairing for Morgan Rielly. He's mobile, he's big, he's got an edge to him, and that he could easily play 20 to 25 minutes a night. But that will not be enough. He's a 20 to 25 point defenseman. He's not an offensive guy. And a top 6 forward who could score 70 to 80 points like Nylander could, you have to get more. You have to get more than just Pesce. What's that?
My trade offer is Pesce and Teravainen for Bracco and Nylander.
I think the Leafs would do that.
I think they would too.
Yeah, the deal that I said on my column when I was theorizing was Teravainen or Michael Furland, whichever one, because Furland's a UFA, Teravainen's an RFA. One of those two and Pesce to the Leafs for Nylander, Andreas Janssen, and Justin Hall. But I think either one of those would be deals that the Leafs would do.
All right, next question. This is from Matt. Russ, given the Pens' recent struggles, do you think a Phil Kessel deal is now more likely to net them some solid defensive help and possibly another forward in return? I still don't think they're going to trade Kessel. I don't. I think they would look at some other moves. And look, Daniel Sprong can still get him an NHLer. I think that's what they would do. I don't think they would move Kessel. What do you think, Mike?
I think they would move Kessel if they're borderline in terms of making the playoffs. If they're closer to February 25th in the deadline and they're fighting for a second wild card spot and they have an opportunity to trade him and get, say, a couple younger players back that could, because remember, Crosby and Malkin are not ancient. They're still in their prime. They still could reset. And if they had a couple younger players, and there was a team out there that needed a scorer like Kessel, like say Arizona. Mm-hmm. I keep going back to Arizona because Tocchet and Kessel were connected in Pittsburgh. If Arizona thought they were Kessel away from making the playoffs and they decided they could trade one or two of their youngsters, that might be a deal that Pittsburgh and Arizona would do. So I think it's possible.
Okay. Here's another question. This is a real good one from Lance. What is the return for Gustav Nyquist going to be, and who needs him? Rangers for Zook made move. I don't know. I don't think the Rangers would take him, but I would tell you that maybe you can go Nyquist and, fifth round pick or something for Simmons, and then maybe Detroit tries to sign Simmons. No, I mean, Detroit needs players like that.
No, I know. I'm just saying, I mean, I'd be surprised if Nyquist gets traded in a 1-for-1 for another rental. Detroit is one of the worst teams in the league, so I think if they're trading Nyquist, they're looking for young, retainable pieces.
Yeah, but they got money to spend. They could offer Simmons a lot of money.
They do.
I'm just saying that may be a wrong thing. All right, we'll go one more.
If Nyquist is a pure rental, while you're looking up the last question, if Nyquist is a pure rental, I think he gets you probably a second round pick and a good prospect. I don't think. Remember, he's a UFA. He's making almost $5 million. He's not. I don't know what he's doing so far this year, but I don't think it's been.
Nyquist has 13 points. He's doing well.
Okay, that's then his value might be a little more.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got his game back to where you would expect it to be. I'm going to go with this other one from. Well, hold on. There's some other questions that popped in last minute. All right. Okay. Adam's got a really good question here. What are the Sabres missing right now that makes them a playoff threat towards the end of the season? Well, if the Buffalo Sabres were able to pick up a great second pairing defenseman in a trade, and if that meant that they had to trade, somebody really good on that team from down below, like maybe even who's the defenseman who hasn't come up yet? Name's escaping me.
Brendan Gooley.
Right. So maybe Brendan Gooley, for somebody who's maybe got 2 years left on a deal, they could be a playoff team, because you could even consider moving Dahlin up later in the season if he's improved that much. I think that's what they're missing. I think everything else is there. The goaltending's almost good enough. And with Skinner there, because there's no guarantee you're going to have Skinner beyond this year.
Yeah,
I can't say that that's just not in the cards for the Sabres if they're close.
Well, the line of Skinner, Pominville, and Eichel has been really good, and I mean, Oppozo is not playing badly. He seems to be coming back a little bit from, the last couple years. I mean, Middlestad still is not producing as well as much as expected, but I think as the year goes on, as the year goes on, I mean, he's going to mature and he's going to start producing more. I don't think they're in trouble at all up front on defense. I agree. They need a veteran second pairing defense. I mean, they have Scandella, they have Ristolainen, and they have Dahlin. After that, you cannot trust Zach Bogosian. Jake McCabe is okay. I mean, they could use depth on defense. I'm not sold on the goaltending. I don't think the goaltending is playoff caliber, but if you get Carter Hutton and
playoff bubble compatible,
right now that's where they are. Maybe they can sneak in if their forwards are great. But I think they need to improve defensively, and maybe they would need an upgrade in goal to actually make it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. All right, we will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your questions. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.